Hi everybody, welcome to a new edition of Let's Talk About Education with Antonio Corrales. We have talked in this show before about the impact of different educational programs on students' life. We have talked about different areas, science, engineering, math, technology. And today we have the honor to have with us Soma Datta, who's going to be talking a little bit to us in simple terms about software engineering and the impact that software engineering may have on students' lives. Soma, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, why don't we start by letting you introduce yourself to the audience and kind of letting them know how to get to where you are in your career.
Yeah. As my undergrad, I really was with chemistry.
Okay.
I had major in chemistry, and looks like after I finished my undergrad, I was not really doing. The amount of time I spent to study chemistry and the output was not getting the direct relationship.
Okay.
So really, my mother is the one who said, "Why don't you go into computer science?"
Okay.
So, I did my master's in computer science, and that's when I started, getting into computer science. It became it's kind of an addiction when you are into this area. It's only through addiction that you will like it. You have to be addicted to it.
Okay.
Basically. So, and then I did my PhD at Texas Tech University. So before I came to do my PhD, I was still teaching undergrads back in India.
Okay.
And there you could teach in colleges without a PhD.
Okay.
So I was able
Okay.
to teach,
Okay.
especially undergrads.
Okay.
So I was teaching undergrads computer science,
Okay.
BS in computer science.
Okay.
And then my goal was to really do a PhD and teach at the university level. And so we moved to the US and got my PhD, and then started looking for jobs. And I was surprised that it's a little different from our country.
Okay.
In our country, you have to get into a career really when you are young.
Okay.
Okay, but mine was not that. I was at a matured age when I switched careers.
Okay.
Which is not just possible in our country. Yeah, it's just not possible. So when I was at Texas Tech, I did work as an associate director.
Okay.
But there I was managing their financial aid and enrollment management through, the softwares. Okay?
Okay.
So I was still into the programming, the software idea, and then I started teaching. 1 year I was at Northeastern State in Oklahoma.
Okay.
Then I got this opportunity to come to Houston, and I'm so glad that I'm here. Teaching was really always my passion.
Okay.
So I'm able to follow my passion, and that's my hobby too. I mean, I really don't have any other hobby, if you will. It's just I like to read those books that what's coming in the future, what's going to happen, how do I teach better.
Okay.
So I like to add in any kind of pedagogy that works very well for the students.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Okay, so what do you see when we talk about software engineering?
Mhm.
Okay, first of all, why don't you explain in simple terms what does that mean? What software engineering mean? And why do you think software engineering is something that people looking at us right now, students and school administrators or educators in general, may be interested on it or may want to get students pursue that type of career?
Right. So software engineering is it's the whole work that we do in developing a software.
Okay.
It starts from getting the requirements from the customer, which we always tell our students that your customer doesn't know what kind of requirements he or she wants, because
Okay.
Everybody is kind of imagining what kind of requirements what would be best to do. So it's not you don't expect that your customers will give you a written set of requirements and you just go and code it and get it out. It's not
Okay.
going to happen. So
Okay.
software engineering, we train students so that they kind of they're able to talk to the customer in customers vocabulary,
Okay.
not in software engineering vocabulary.
Okay. Okay.
and get most from the customers.
Okay.
So right now, what we are trying, we are going this agile way of software development, which is really working for the industry now. It's a very new area. Even software engineering is pretty new area, and then agile is even newer. Okay.
Okay. So what we're talking here is they meet with customers,
Mm-hmm.
an example, and then customers tell them we need a software can do this or can do that,
Right.
and then they translate it into coding. And
Yeah, they
okay.
translate into coding. So what they do is they talk to the customers, get their details, they translate into coding,
Okay.
and then they kind of ship it to the customer to have a look as to do you really like it.
Okay.
And they get it back from there. They again redo whatever the customer thought was not right,
Okay.
or the customer had a different idea. That's where the agile method really helps, where you are having this idea of I changed my mind. It's not really the way I wanted it. I wanted it a little different.
Mhm.
And so uh, the agile way of developing will help you take care of that.
Okay.
And very an example is the apps. You keep getting these updates every other week.
Okay.
So what's really happening is they are either adding a feature to it, or they are correcting the bug that's happened in the app. So software engineers, what they do is they know the sequence, how we're going to collect the requirements from the customer, how we are going to demo the requirements without coding, do like a prototype and demo the requirements to the customer to find out if really that's what the customer needs, and then get into this coding phase and study about, not just right away get into the coding phase, but study if there is something else in the market that we could borrow and attach to this software, or is it better to develop it from scratch, or do we just take a third party tool to add it to it. Okay.
Nice.
And then you get into coding. Once you have come into a consortium as to, this is kind of the customer is wanting, then you start getting coding. Okay. So nowadays we don't code the whole software and give it to the customer. We code the core requirement of this customer.
Okay.
Okay. Kano, I really like to want to point out this. Kano is one of the person in Agile. He has this beautiful idea of saying that how you're going to decide on what requirements the customer wants is first do the basic thing.
Okay.
Once you give the basic to the customer will say, I want it to really work faster. So do the performance of it. Okay. So once the basic and the performance is complete, you really want next time you give something to the customer, you want to delight the customer. So the delight. So next you do something which is going to delight the customer. So then eventually this delight becomes the basic thing.
Okay.
And then you again do the performance of the basic thing, and then you do something something where that will delight the customer. Like your first
That's gonna
iPad.
make you really happy.
Right. So
Yeah.
the first version of iPad was very much different from the version of iPad now. Think
Okay.
about your iPhones, okay? You have the facial recognition now. So as soon as this facial recognition came in, customers were delighted. Woohoo! We have facial recognition. We don't have to do our thumb or any fingerprinting.
Exactly.
Okay. Before that, we had to do the passcode. Okay.
Yeah.
So every time you're giving something, I'm just bringing one
Yeah,
example.
yeah.
So every time you're giving to the customer, you are delighting the customer. Then you go back and work on it to make it work better. Okay.
Yeah.
Next time, next we are coming up with these phones which are foldable.
Mhm.
So that's kind of delighting everyone. Oh, we can fold our phones and we can open it up into a big iPad. So
Yeah.
so that's a training we give our students, how you're going to break your requirements of the customer's requirements.
So there's a
that-
lot of kind of marketing there in the mix of the software
yeah,
design.
there is
Kind of
the
customer satisfaction.
satisfaction.
and- yeah.
That is the key. That is the key. Customer satisfaction. If your customer is not satisfied, you are in trouble.
Okay, so
Yeah.
let's talk about a little bit before we get into the details of the coding and all that part about the job market, because a lot of
Right.
people who are looking at us right now, school administrators and students and educators, tell us why they wanna try to start introducing students into software engineering in terms of jobs, because I mean, basically, in your experience, is there a big market for this
Of
type of people?
course, yeah. It's the total. Uh, Everywhere you without software you don't do anything.
Exactly.
You know that.
Yeah,
Even
yes.
you're recording, you're using your software.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yes.
So now when you're developing the software, you do need expertise in not just coding, but you need other expertise so that you will manage well the software.
Yes.
So that you're able to test it, you're able to deploy it at the right time.
Yeah.
There are many more things that you. Anytime you look for a job, it is a job of a software engineer. And if you could come out from a computer science background,
Okay.
but computer science more talks about coding and the performance.
Okay.
What's missing in that is the detailed designing
Okay.
of how you're going to develop that software.
Okay.
So the detailed
Which is
design.
where is the customer played a big role in that?
Right, the customer played a big role, and you play a big role into how you're going to split your requirements into smaller bits so that you are able to deliver smaller chunks of your software, so that your customer is getting delighted every time you
You're
do
giving
it.
them a final product.
Yeah, you're giving one small product, and you're again increasing. You're incrementally making that product better, like your iPhones. Okay, so we gave them the facial expression. Now we're going to give them a folding phone. Okay, we gave them the first iPhones. You had to enter the code.
Yeah.
4 digits code.
Yeah.
Then it changed to a 6 digit.
Yeah.
Then you have your fingerprinting.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just telling to access
Yeah,
to your
yeah,
phones.
yeah.
Okay, now you have your fingerprint, you have your code as well, but then you have your facial expression. So
Yeah.
it's just taking a picture of your face and it just opens to you real quick.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's kind of delighting and giving the customer option to want that big facility.
Make it their life easier.
Yeah.
So you do see a big job market for
There
this
is, yeah.
population. Okay,
Mhm.
that's awesome.
So
Now-
my students always are getting a job. They don't start as managers.
Yeah, of course.
Of course, because they're students.
Yeah.
But they quickly get into that
They
position.
transition
Yeah.
to that. So for people who are looking at us right now, what do you recommend? Let's say school administrators or superintendents of schools. What do you recommend them to start in their school district or in their schools to start introducing students to software engineering? What type of, I don't know, web pages or type of programs or initiatives do you think that they should start implementing, even if you start in kindergarten or whatever?
Right.
But how do you introduce that to them?
Right. So I would think, because it's a team, any software that you're developing,
Yeah.
anything that you do, it's not, you're not doing in silo.
Okay.
You are a team based.
Exactly.
So you really want, give them a team project and tell them, one of you is going to help manage it, one of you will do this. So why don't you split up whoever is best in something? Somebody's going to draw. Could be any project. Don't have to develop a software.
Okay.
Especially for the school kids. Okay.
Okay.
The K-12. They don't have to develop. Those that are not learning to develop a software,
Okay.
we can tell them. This is your project. Now why don't you split that project, that problem in the team, and each of you take one part of it and start working on it,
Okay.
and then come back and see what's working, what's not working.
So always that project based design where you have different team members, teamwork.
Teamwork.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, that's good.
And you don't want to. You're not going to assign a leader to it. Everybody is responsible for his or her work.
Particularly job description for
Yeah,
each one. Okay.
everybody knows it, and then it becomes like a family in the a second family, wherever it is. So let's say I'm not able to do something. I tell them when I meet next time, say I'm not able to do can somebody help me?
Yeah.
So somebody should really come and help. Okay.
Yes.
And you should not blame individuals if the project is not done. You should blame the whole team.
Exactly.
So the feelingness of a team really grows because you're not blaming one individual person, and let them sort out for themselves how they want to do it. Let them tell, "Hey, you're doing less work, come on, do much." Let them sort out. Just leave it to them, and they when you leave it to them, they take all the responsibility.
That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Mhm.
Now, where do you see that these students struggle the most in software engineering? What are the areas that you see that they have a hard time learning or passing by?
Right, right. One thing I really see is, well, depends on the population or
Okay.
the cohort that's coming in.
Okay.
Uh, Sometimes what I'm seeing now is they have difficulties coding. So,
Coding.
yeah,
I was going to ask you about that too. I mean, maybe you can unite those two answers. But you know, what type of languages are you
yes.
recommending nowadays, or are you still seeing with the same basic? Or I mean, what do you see that, and what are the things that they struggle the most?
Right. So, if it's coding, so what we did in our program is we are doing engineering software 1 and 2, where they are basically doing coding, but we are not teaching coding like we used to teach in the undergrad, okay? Because they are grad students. So what we're doing is we have introduced functional programming, which is something which we say it is reusing. So each code you can reuse it for something else, okay?
Okay.
It's reusing. You know exactly what's going to be the end, what input and what output comes out. So the state does not change inside the code. So there are other advantages of functional programming, which is what we introduced. Okay, what kind of coding language, programming language you want to know? Any language that you know is good, because once you know the logic, pretty it's pretty easy to change from one language to the other. So right now we are doing C# with functional coding, but we could do Python, we could do Scala. I mean, we could do any lot of these software languages. I was at a conference in Montreal for machine learning in December, and then I was talking to Facebook and to Uber. They are working on artificial intelligence and on machine learning as well. And I was also talking to Amazon. So I was asking them, what kind of languages do you want us to, teach our students, so that So they said it's not what kind of language. They could know any language, because we have teams for different languages. We'll just put
so within the different companies, they have their different
their teams. So
there's job for everybody.
There's job for everybody.
As long as you know the
right. You know how to code.
So you see the students struggling learning the language.
The functional programming concept, because they really come from object-oriented programming, and now what I have found out going to these conferences, of course, that companies are moving towards functional programming. Well, this technology keeps, you have your learning curve pretty high. So it keeps going up and up. So the learning curve keeps changing. So
Absolutely.
really, yeah. So.
Well, I want to ask you kind of to finalize, Soma, what are you researching lately? What is your research?
My research right now is couple of things. I am one of which I am doing in data mining. It is to find out rules for infrequent classes. That is where, let's say, you have a population. Let's say how many people would likely get HIV. Because the population of HIV is much less to the population of the country.
Exactly.
So with those little small data set, is there a way we could identify better prediction
patterns to predict?
To prediction, so that the doctors can use it.
That's really interesting.
It doesn't matter. It could be doctors. It could also be administrators, where you want to retain your students. Let's say your students are you want to find out why students are leaving, and you want to retain them. So less students drop, right? So that's the smaller population. So I'm working on populations where you have two sets of data. One is students that are staying back, one that are dropping. I'm trying to see how we could get these drop students to retain and continue with their education. So anything of which is of a minority range, I'm looking for. That's one thing. And I'm also working on Agile to see if we can get an ensemble method and identify what kind of method really works for certain group of people, because Agile is really agile. You can define however you want to work on the team. So I'm trying to see if we can identify that and say, your team might be better off following this kind of project.
That is fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, Soma, I want to thank you one more time for being with us today.
Thank you.
Folks out there, remember that we had this
Thank you.
interview and many
Appreciate it.
others, absolutely, and many others on Antonio Corrales YouTube channel. Let's talk about education with Antonio Corrales and installing evaluation and assessment.com. Please help somebody today and see you next time.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.